You know, sometimes you see a headline that just makes you stop. I saw this Glenn Kirshner video, Trump undercuts his DOJ lawyers in Abrego Garcia deportation case.
Oh, yeah.
And I immediately thought, okay, this is something we need to unpack. Because the idea itself, right?
Yeah.
A former president maybe making things harder for his own Justice Department lawyers. It's intriguing.
It really is. And at the heart of it, you've got this individual, Abrego Garcia. The story is he was wrongly deported to El Salvador.
Like, wrongfully.
And then the Supreme Court steps in, the highest court, and they order the Trump administration to, quote, facilitate his return.
Facilitate, that's the key word.
Exactly. So you're immediately thinking, okay, Supreme Court order. Why would the government itself or parts of it seem hesitant? It's puzzling.
Totally. So for this deep dive, we've looked at excerpts from that Kirshner analysis, really trying to piece together what happened. We're not taking sides, obviously, just trying to understand the events.
Yeah, understand the sequence, the judge's reaction, which sounds pretty intense, and even this statement from Donald Trump himself that kind of complicates things.
It really does. Seems like a classic judicial versus executive branch tension point, maybe.
Could be. So let's start right there with that initial Supreme Court order. They said facilitate his return, but the video suggests the DOJ lawyers weren't exactly jumping to it.
No. Kirshner's take is pretty strong. He uses words like reluctant, dragging their feet. He even suggests they were potentially violating a court order.
Now that's Kirshner's interpretation, we should stress, based on what happened next in court.
Absolutely. It's his analysis.
Uh-huh.
But it definitely sets a certain tone for what comes next.
Which involves Judge Paula Shinnis. She's a federal judge down in Maryland.
Right.
And after that Supreme Court ruling, she didn't wait around. She ordered the administration to give daily updates. Daily. On what they were doing to get Abrego Garcia back.
Wow. Daily updates. That signals some real concern from the judge, doesn't it? Like she felt she needed to keep very close tabs on them.
You'd think so. And the video describes a pretty tense courtroom. Judge Shinnis apparently chastised the DOJ lawyers, showed clear frustration. Seems she wasn't happy with their compliance or lack thereof.
It sounds like she was making her position very clear, sending the signal.
And she followed up fast. Like within hours of the Supreme Court decision, she issued another order, even more specific.
Okay, what did that one say?
It directed the federal government to take, and this is specific, all available steps to get Garcia back as soon as possible. That urgency, as soon as possible, coming straight from the judge. It really ramps things up.
Yeah, no ambiguity there. And she spelled out exactly what info she wanted, right?
I did. The order demanded an immediate update. Garcia's location, his status, where is he, what's happening, plus a full rundown of everything they'd already done to facilitate his return.
Okay, past actions.
And crucially, what additional steps they were considering. The whole plan, basically.
You'd think that would be crystal clear. Leave no room for doubt.
You would. But according to Kirshner's analysis in the video, the DOJ lawyers then blew right by that deadline, just missed it.
They missed the deadline to provide that specific information.
That's the claim. Didn't provide what Judge Shinnis asked for when she asked for it. And you can imagine that's probably where the judge's patience really started to fray.
I would imagine so. You can't just ignore a federal judge's direct order like that, can you?
Well, it led to another order from Judge Shinnis. This time, she put it in writing, formally stating the defendants, meaning the administration had failed to comply with her previous order.
Okay, so she's documenting the noncompliance.
Yes. And she listed the specific info again. Location, status, steps taken, future steps. It's like she's having to repeat herself, demanding this basic information related to a Supreme Court decision.
So contempt charges next. Fines. What happened?
Well, this is interesting. Instead of immediately going for contempt of court, which is a big deal, serious consequences, she essentially gave them another chance.
Huh. Why do you think she did that?
Maybe proceeding cautiously, making sure every I was dotted, every T crossed before taking that step, or just giving them one last opportunity to do what she ordered. Hard to say for sure.
Like, okay, deadline missed. One more chance. Get me this information.
Pretty much. But then things get even more complicated because Donald Trump himself makes a public statement.
Ah, yes, the statement. What did he actually say?
He said, and this is a direct quote apparently, if the Supreme Court said bring somebody back, I would do that. I respect the Supreme Court.
Wow, okay. I respect the Supreme Court. That sounds pretty clear-cut.
Doesn't it? And you can bet Abrego Garcia's lawyers noticed. The video says they jumped on that statement immediately.
How so? What did they do?
They put it straight into a court filing. Their argument was basically, see, The boss himself says he respects the Supreme Court and would follow their orders.
And the Supreme Court did order the facilitation of Garcia's return.
Exactly. That was their point. So based on Trump's own words, the administration should be actively working to bring Garcia back. No ifs, ands, or buts.
So now you've got this weird situation where the former president's public statement seems to kind of contradict what his own Justice Department is or isn't doing in court.
It creates this really fascinating dynamic, doesn't it? A potential conflict within the executive branch itself laid bare in court filings.
So Garcia's lawyers, seeing this apparent lack of action and now armed with Trump's statement, what did they do next? Did they push harder?
Oh, yeah. They went back to the court asking for more help. 3 specific things, actually. It shows they were really trying to force the issue.
Okay, 3 things. What were they?
First, they wanted an order forcing the government to take specific, concrete actions by a hard deadline, end of day, Monday, April 14th, to actually comply with the original injunction. Not just talk, but action.
Right. Put your money where your mouth is, essentially. What was the second thing?
Second, they asked for expedited discovery.
Discovery. That's gathering evidence, right?
Right.
Like emails, documents.
Exactly. Expedited means they wanted it fast. They wanted to quickly find out what the government was really doing or not doing behind the closed doors, see the internal discussions.
Get inside the process. Makes sense. And the third request.
This was probably the biggest one. They asked the court to order the government to show cause.
Show cause. What does that mean in practice?
It basically means the judge is ordering the government lawyers to come to court and explain why they shouldn't be held in contempt of court for ignoring the previous orders.
Okay, so the burden shifts to the DOJ. They have to justify their inaction?
Precisely. They had to show up by 10 a.m. that Monday, April 14th, and give the judge a very good reason or face potential contempt penalties. That really turns up the heat.
No kidding. A show cause order is serious business.
Definitely raises the stakes. If the judge isn't satisfied with their explanation, well, contempt is on the table.
So how did the DOJ respond to all this pressure? The missed deadlines, the Trump statement, the motion for contempt?
Well, they did file something. But according to Kirshner's analysis, it wasn't quite what Judge Shinnis was demanding. They submitted a declaration from a State Department official.
Okay, a declaration. What did it say?
It was from a senior official, Michael Kangik. And it stated that, yes, Abrego Garcia was in a terrorism confinement center in El Salvador. It confirmed he was alive, secure.
So an update on his condition and location.
Yes, but critically, it also said he was being detained under El Salvador's sovereign authority.
Okay. But did it say what the U.S. government was doing to get him back?
Yeah.
Like the judge ordered?
And that's the absolute crux of it, according to the video analysis. It apparently failed to provide that information. It didn't detail the steps taken, being taken, or planned to actually facilitate his return.
So it answered part of the question where he is, but completely sidestepped the main point of the judge's order.
That's the argument presented in the video, that the declaration gave his status but dodged the central issue of U.S. action to comply with the Supreme Court and Judge Shinnis's orders. It looked like defiance again.
Wow. Kirshner's analysis you mentioned was pretty strong on this point.
Yeah, his interpretation was quite pointed. He suggested the DOJ was basically gleefully in contempt of court at this stage. Strong words, but they reflect the perceived pattern of noncompliance.
Gleefully in contempt. That certainly paints a picture.
It highlights the level of frustration surrounding the case based on the sequence of events and the repeated judicial orders.
So what was the next step anticipated in the video? Was there another hearing scheduled?
Yes. The video mentioned an upcoming hearing set for April 15th. The expectation was that Judge Shinnis would definitely address this DOJ declaration.
And likely the pending motion for contempt, too.
Exactly. The analysis suggested she might very well use that hearing to set a formal show cause hearing, force the DOJ lawyers into court to finally explain themselves under threat of contempt.
So potentially a major confrontation brewing.
Seems like it was heading that way. A real legal showdown was anticipated.
Okay, so let's recap this whole sequence. It's quite a journey.
It really is. You start with the Supreme Court in order to bring back someone wrongly deported. Simple enough, right?
You'd think. But then you have the Justice Department, according to the source, seeming reluctant, dragging feet.
Then a federal judge steps in, gets frustrated, issues order after order demanding updates, demanding action, daily updates even.
And then the former president makes a public statement saying he respects the Supreme Court and would follow such orders,
Which seems to contradict the apparent lack of action from his administration's lawyers.
leading to the plaintiff's lawyers demanding concrete steps, expedited discovery, and that crucial show cause order for contempt.
And finally, the DOJ files a declaration that confirms the man's location, but allegedly still avoids explaining how they're complying with the court's core mandate to facilitate his return.
It really hammers home that point the video makes, doesn't it? This disturbing possibility.
Yeah, the idea that the government could, unconstitutionally deport someone.
And then basically say, oops, sorry, can't get him back, even when the highest court says you have to facilitate it.
It raises profound questions about checks and balances, about the power of the courts versus the executive branch.
Absolutely. It hits right at the separation of powers, doesn't it? What happens when the judiciary issues orders, clear directives, and the executive branch appears resistant?
It forces you to think about the real-world limits of judicial power and the mechanisms for enforcing the rule of law, especially when dealing with complex international situations and potentially internal governmental disagreements.
So the final thought for everyone listening is really about those broader implications. Beyond this specific tragic case of Abrego Garcia, what does this kind of standoff signal for the rule of law itself? Something to definitely keep thinking about.